Alright, today we're going to start our next little quick unit. This is going to be a short unit. Adding in just a couple more shapes and learning how to find the volume and surface area of them. And these go with the 8th grade standards for volume and surface area. So, when we did this unit a couple months ago, we learned about prisms and pyramids. And so in this unit, the 8th grade standards cover curved 3D shapes. So cylinder, cone, and sphere. In your table of contents, today we're going to talk about the volume of cylinder, cone, and sphere. That's the title. Then on the next clean sheet of notebook paper, right at the top of the page, volume of cylinder, cone, and sphere. And then our essential question for today is, how can I find the volume of cylinders, cones, and spheres? Hit pause and set up your notes. When you're ready to move on, hit play. Alright, this is a review. You already have this in your notes, so you do not need to copy this again, but let's just quickly review what is volume. It is the amount a container will hold or its capacity. All 3D figures have volume. How can I measure volume? It's in cubic units. Remember, units cubed with a little exponent of 3 on it. The formula for volume is the area of the base times the height. So with that in mind, again, you didn't need to copy this down. Let's look at each shape separately, starting with the cylinder. If you'll copy this into your notes up here and write the formula. This is your formula. You may even want to highlight the formula there, volume of a cylinder. So what you're copying down says cylinder. Since the base of the cylinder is a circle and its area is equal to pi r squared, we multiply the area of the circle by the height of the figure to find the volume. If you remember, again, like I said a second ago, the volume is the area of the base times the height. The base on a cylinder is a circle, so we plug in the area of a circle formula right here and multiply times the height of the cylinder. That's how we get our volume formula for cylinder, pi r squared h. Okay, so write this formula in your notes, and you may even want to put a star next to it or highlight it. Hit pause if you're not done copying. When you're ready to move on to the example that we're going to do, hit play. Okay, we're going to find the volume of the shape, and this one says leave the answer in terms of pi. So if you remember back to our circles unit, we had some questions that say leave your answer in exact terms of pi. You'll sometimes have problems with the cylinder, cone, and sphere to tell you to use 3.14 for pi, and then sometimes we'll have to use pi. Just leave it in terms of pi. Okay? So I'm going to start by writing my formula. Volume equals pi r squared h. Okay? Now plugging into my formula, I'm leaving the pi symbol. Normally I'll put 3.14 there, but since they told us to leave it in terms of pi, I'm using pi. The radius is 10, so 10 squared, and the height, r, and then the height of the cylinder is 12. Okay? From here, I know 10 squared is 100. And then I multiply that times 12. This is going to be 1200 pi. My board will write. There we go. And my units are going to be centimeters cubed. Okay? So very similar to the process that we learned a while back for how to find the volume of prisms. The difference is we're kind of combining in our knowledge of circles with the volume and surface area problems we did before. Okay? One more. Look at this one. Call this example 2 and do it with me in your notes. Notice what we were given from the circle in this problem. We have not the radius, but we have been given the diameter. So if I know that the diameter is 2.25, that needs to be converted to the radius so that I can use it in my volume formula. So I divide that by 2. 2.25 divided by 2, my radius is going to be 1.125, okay? So now writing my formula, volume equals pi r squared h, and they didn't tell me to use the pi symbol, so I'm going to use 3.14. For radius, I have 1.125, and I'm going to square that in a second, and then the height is 4.25. In my directions, I see that they tell me to the nearest cubic inch, so I'm going to get probably some crazy long decimal. I know that I'm going to end up rounding to the nearest whole number. So 1.125 squared is going to give me 1.265625. I'm going to multiply that times 3.14 and then times 4.25. And so rounded to the nearest cubic inch, I actually got 16.889 blah blah blah. I'm rounding to the nearest cubic inch. I get about 17 inches cubed. Okay? So that's how we find the volume of a cylinder. Our next shape is cone. If you remember, when we learned about prisms and pyramids, we learned that a pyramid's volume is 1/3 of the volume of a prism. A cone and cylinder have that same relationship. The volume of a cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder. Copy that down, and then copy down the formula for volume of a cone. So it's the exact same thing as cylinder, pi r squared h, but then we have this 1/3 in front of it. And what do we remember from our unit on volume and surface area? When we have 1/3, that tells me that I'm going to divide by 3 at the end. Okay, so we need to write down this sentence here and then copy the formula for volume of a cone, and I would take my highlighter or my pencil and put a star next to this formula as well. So we've learned volume of a cylinder, now we're on volume of a cone, our second formula. All right, if you need another minute to copy this down, hit pause. If you're ready to move on to the example, hit play. Okay, this is example 3 from our notes. We've already done 2 cylinders. Now example 3 is going to be the volume of this cone. So I'm going to start by writing my formula. Volume equals 1/3 pi r squared h. And they told me to tell it in terms of pi, so I'm going to leave the pi symbol. 1/3 I save for the end. Okay, 1/3 pi. Now r squared, I see that the radius here is 5, so 5 squared. And then the height is 10. Okay, so now I'm going to multiply. 5 squared is 25. And then 25 times 10 is going to be 250. Okay, now I want to take 250 and divide that by 3. Whatever that gives me, I'm going to put the pi symbol after it. So 250 divided by 3 gives me 83 1/3, so 83.3 bar notation, pi. There we go. Or we could say 83 1/3 pi. Okay? And that is going to be centimeters cubed. Okay, so same process as cylinder, only difference is we divide by 3 at the end. All right, let's try one more now where we use 3.14 for pi. So here we go. Find the volume of the sand in the bottom of the hourglass. So we're really just looking at this part of our hourglass. Told us to the nearest cubic inch, and we're going to use 3.14 for pi. Call this example 4 in your notes and do it with me. First, I'm writing my formula like I did before. I'm going to plug in 3.14 for pi. I see that my radius is 3.25, so that's what I'm going to put here. And then my height is 7.75. All right, next I'm going to square 3.25, so I'm going to multiply it times itself in my calculator. And I get 10.5625. And then I need to multiply that times 3.14. And then times 7.75. So that gives me 257.03843. Now I'm going to hit divided by 3 in my calculator. And I'm going to round this to the nearest whole number. I'm seeing 85.679 blah, blah, blah. So since it's 85.6, that's going to round to 86. And that would be inches cubed. Okay? Rounded to the nearest whole number, like my directions said. Last shape is sphere. Copy this into your notes. A sphere is a set of points in a space that are that should say given. Let me change that real quick. A given distance r from the center. So r is our radius of the sphere. The volume of a sphere is 2/3 the volume of a cylinder. I've included a little picture over here so you can see how that works. If I had a sphere with the same radius as a cylinder and put it inside, it would take up 2/3 of the space. So isn't that interesting? But the formula that we use for volume of a sphere is this right here. Copy this and then highlight it or put a star next to it. Volume equals 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, a little bit different here because instead of squaring the radius, we're going to cube the radius, which means we multiply it times itself 3 times. Then we'll multiply it times pi. 4/3 is different than the 1/3 because we're not just going to divide by 3. What we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 4 first, and then we're going to divide by 3. That's the same as multiplying by 4/3. So we're going to do times 4 divided by 3 to get this formula to work. So hit pause and finish copying if you need to. When you're ready to move on to the example, then keep going. Okay, so here we have our sphere, and there's only one dimension for a sphere because all the dimensions are the same. So that's kind of interesting about a sphere. 4/3 pi r cubed. So all I have to do is plug in 3.14 for pi and then 17 for the radius. First thing, I'm going to do 17 times 17 times 17, so I'm cubing that, and that's 4,913. Bring everything else down. Now I'm going to multiply that times 3.14, and I have my answer in my calculator. That's 4/3 times 15426.82. So now, like I was telling you earlier, first we're going to multiply times 4, and then we're going to divide by 3. And we're doing this all in the calculator. So I still have my 15,426.82. I'm going to hit times 4 equals divided by 3 equals. And I'm going to get the volume of the sphere is 20,569.093. And that would be inches cubed. Okay? And that should be example 5 in your notes. Last example, and then you can get started on digits. Let's do one more. So this time they gave me the diameter. They're telling me to imagine if I spin the nickel, that would create like a sphere. So since this is the diameter, I first need to figure out what would the radius be. So I'm going to divide that by 2. 21.21 divided by 2 gives me 10.605. So now in my formula, 4/3 pi r squared. I'm going to plug in 3.14 for pi, and I'm plugging in 10.605 for, oops, I messed up the formula. Cubed, not squared. Don't do what I did. Okay, I'm going to cube my radius first. 10.605 times 10.605 times 10.605. At this point, I have a big long thing, 1,192.7021. I'm not going to write that down. I'm just going to tell you. Next, I want to multiply times 3.14. Then remember, after I have that, I do times 4 and then divided by 3. Times 4, enter, divided by 3, enter. And I am rounding to the nearest tenth. So this is approximately 4993.4. I actually have 4/6 after that, but it would just round to the nearest tenth because that's what the directions say. And this is millimeters cubed. And that's it, volume of a sphere. So we've learned 3 new formulas today. Make sure you have them clearly marked in your notes so that you can find them when you're working on the digits assignments. All right, at this point, you're ready to start on the digits in the IXLs. If you need help, raise your hand.